Princess Leonor of Spain and the constitutional line she cannot cross. Picture the silence of a military courtyard just before dawn. Boots aligned. Flags barely moving. The air holds that unmistakable stillness where discipline replaces sound. At the center of it all stands Spain's future queen, not in a gown, not behind glass, but inside an institution that does not bend for symbolism. And here's the detail almost nobody outside the palace understands. In this space, authority is not what gives her power. Constraint is. Because there is a line here. Invisible, constitutional, unforgiving. And Princess Leonor has been raised to never cross it. Every monarchy has myths. Spain's has a framework. Written, enforced, tested by history. And the survival of the crown depends less on charisma than on obedience to a system designed to limit it. That is the paradox shaping Leonor's future. Spain's monarchy is not built to dominate political life. It is built to stabilize it. And that stability rests on a boundary so firm that even the future queen cannot approach it without consequence. Imagine the echo of footsteps in a palace corridor. Each step carries centuries of expectation, but also centuries of correction. Because whenever Spain's crown forgot its limits, the country paid the price. This is rarely explained in full context. The Spanish Constitution does not grant the monarch freedom of political expression. It does the opposite. It demands silence where others speak, neutrality where others campaign, restraint where others act. And this is not ceremonial restraint. It is legal. The crown cannot vote, cannot legislate, cannot publicly take sides, cannot interfere. Even its influence must be indirect, filtered, and justified through constitutional channels. That line, the one she cannot cross, is not symbolic. It is survival. The phrase you saw before clicking, the line she can't cross, isn't just design. It is the monarchy's hidden tension made visible. Because everything about Princess Leonor's preparation points not toward expansion of power, but toward containment of it. But what happens when the cameras stop rolling? Behind closed doors, this constraint becomes the real training. Spain's monarchy understands something modern audiences often overlook. Legitimacy today is earned not by visibility, but by discipline. The crown must be present without being persuasive, influential without being directive, powerful without appearing to wield power at all. That balance is brutal, and Leonor is being trained inside it. From military instruction to legal briefings, every environment she enters reinforces the same lesson. The crown exists above politics but within the law. Any deviation, any personal opinion expressed too loudly, any gesture misread as preference, risks collapsing that balance. Observers forget how closely this connects to Spain's constitutional framework. Because Spain is not a symbolic monarchy floating above democracy. It is embedded in it. Anchored to parliamentary authority. Dependent on public trust. That trust is conditional. And this is where the tension sharpens. Princess Leonor is young, visible, global. She represents continuity in an age that demands authenticity. Expression. Opinion. But the crown forbids all three when they threaten neutrality. Here lies the first cliffhanger. How does a future queen remain relevant in a world that punishes silence, when silence is the job? This is not a theoretical question. It is already being tested. Notice her public appearances. Measured, scripted, devoid of improvisation. There is no accident here. Every word is weighed not for popularity, but for constitutional safety. Even her body language matters. The way she stands at attention. The way she defers. The way she listens more than she speaks. These are not personality traits. They are institutional signals. Few realize how this subtle discipline ties into centuries of royal protocol. In Spain, the monarchy does not lead by momentum. It leads by stillness. Media reports often frame this as stiffness, distance, even coldness. But insiders whisper about something else entirely. Containment. Because every relaxed gesture carries risk. Every spontaneous moment invites interpretation. And interpretation, in constitutional monarchies, can become accusation. This distinction matters more than it appears. The line Leonor cannot cross is not just political. It is cultural, emotional, even moral. She cannot appear partisan, cannot be seen favoring regions, ideologies, movements. In a country shaped by historical division, even tone can be read as allegiance. And here's the moment almost nobody outside the palace considers: even silence can be misread. So the crown calibrates not just action, but absence. This is where tradition collides with modern expectation. Audiences today crave transparency, personality, relatability. But Spain's monarchy survives by offering something else, predictability. And predictability requires constraint. At minute 4, the phrase returns quietly, the line she can't cross. Not as threat, but as protection. Because when monarchies fail, they rarely do so by force. They fail by overreach, by speaking when they should listen, by acting when they should wait. Spain remembers this. It remembers kings who crossed lines, who blurred neutrality, who lost the trust that kept the institution standing. Leonor has inherited those lessons. This is why her education feels less like preparation for leadership and more like preparation for restraint. Legal scholars are embedded in her training. Constitutional advisors frame every scenario. Even hypothetical questions are answered with caution. What if the public demands clarity? What if there is pressure to comment? What if silence becomes unpopular? The answer is always the same. The crown does not respond to pressure. It responds to law. But here's the second cliffhanger. What happens when the law itself becomes the source of tension? Spain's constitution gives the monarch a role, but no voice. Presence, but no position. Authority, but no agency. This is sustainable only if the public understands the difference. And understanding is fragile. At minute 7, the tension deepens. Public reaction to Leonor is largely positive, respectful, curious. But beneath that support lies expectation. A desire to see her as a person, not just an institution. That desire is dangerous. Because the moment she becomes emotionally legible, she becomes politically readable. And political readability is exactly what the Constitution forbids. This is why every symbolic detail matters. The placement of a medal, the order of greetings, the institutions she visits, and those she does not. Each decision reinforces the line she cannot cross. Even her future cannot be framed in personal terms. Marriage, friendship, influence, all filtered through constitutional scrutiny. This is often misunderstood outside Spain. The monarchy is not trying to erase Leonor's individuality. It is trying to prevent it from becoming leverage. Here lies the midpoint escalation. At minute 10, the question shifts. This is no longer about what she is allowed to do. It is about what the monarchy needs her not to do. Because Spain's democracy relies on the crown being inert at moments of political volatility. Calm when others inflame, silent when others shout, and that silence must feel trustworthy. This is the turning point, where ceremony gives way to scrutiny. As Leonor becomes more visible, the margin for error shrinks. The public will watch not just what she says, but what she avoids saying. This is where legitimacy is tested. Not through crisis, but through consistency. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Restraint only works if it is boring. Spectacle undermines neutrality. Emotion invites interpretation. Drama breeds alignment. So the crown embraces monotony. And Leonor is learning to carry it. But beneath that monotony, pressure builds. Because one day, a moment will come when neutrality itself is challenged. When the public wants reassurance. When silence feels insufficient. That moment has not arrived yet. But it is coming. At minute 13, the third cliffhanger emerges. What happens when the line she cannot cross becomes the line the public wants her to step over? This is where the constitutional monarchy reveals its true cost. The monarch cannot resolve political conflict, cannot offer solutions, cannot promise change. All she can offer is continuity. And continuity only works if people believe it matters. This is why the institution survives by ritual. Ritual is predictable, reassuring. It signals that systems still hold. Every oath, every uniform, every protocol reinforces the same message: the crown will not intervene. Even when it could. Even when silence is criticized. And this is the climax, not in spectacle, but in legitimacy. The monarchy's survival depends on whether restraint can still command respect in an age of immediacy. Leonor's role is not to redefine the line. It is to honor it. To prove that boundaries do not weaken leadership, they preserve it. And yet, beneath the discipline, something human persists. She is aware, observant, absorbing the weight of expectations she did not choose. And that awareness shapes her presence. Confidence without assertion, authority without expression, leadership without voice. This is Spain's constitutional gamble. That a future queen can embody power by refusing to use it. As we move toward the final moments, the perspective widens. Spain's monarchy is not frozen in time. It adapts, slowly, carefully, always within limits. Those limits are the point. They protect democracy from the crown, and the crown from democracy's volatility. And Princess Leonor stands exactly where she must. On the right side of the line. The story does not end here. The next chapter reveals pressures even more intense than today's. Moments when neutrality will be questioned. When silence will be misread. When restraint will feel like absence. And when that day comes, Spain will not ask whether Leonor is charismatic enough. It will ask whether she stayed within the line. Because in Spain's monarchy, crossing it is not courage. It is collapse. And the future queen knows that some power is only preserved by never reaching for it at all. The cameras will keep following her. That much is certain. Every step, every ceremony, every pause between applause will be studied for meaning. But the real story will continue in the moments you never see. Because the most difficult test of a constitutional monarch is not crisis. It is temptation. Temptation to clarify. Temptation to reassure. Temptation to explain when silence feels inadequate. And this is where the line she cannot cross becomes most fragile. As Leonor moves closer to adulthood, the world around her grows louder. Social media accelerates judgment. Global audiences project expectations shaped by other monarchies, other cultures, other rules. They will ask why she does not speak more freely. Why she does not take positions. Why she appears distant when empathy seems demanded. But distance, in Spain's constitutional logic, is not coldness. It is protection. This detail is rarely explained outside Spain. The crown's credibility depends on its refusal to compete with elected power. The moment a monarch is seen to lead opinion, democracy begins to wobble. And history shows that once that balance tilts, it is almost impossible to restore. So Leonor's restraint is not passive. It is active discipline. Watch the way institutions are placed around her. Military, judicial, parliamentary. Each appearance reinforces a single idea: the crown belongs to the state, not to sentiment. And yet, beneath that architecture, pressure accumulates. Because there will be moments when Spain itself is divided. When voices rise. When regions pull in opposite directions. When the public looks instinctively toward the crown for reassurance. That is when the line matters most. The monarchy cannot heal division by taking sides. It can only remind the nation that the framework still holds. This is where continuity becomes more than a word. Continuity is not nostalgia. It is stability under stress. And Leonor is being shaped for that exact function. The irony is sharp. The more disciplined she becomes, the less visible her influence appears. And yet, the institution depends on that invisibility. This is why so much of her preparation feels almost severe. Why spontaneity is discouraged. Why emotional transparency is carefully rationed. Not because the crown fears humanity, but because it fears misinterpretation. At this stage, every future scenario is being quietly rehearsed. Not speeches, but silences. Not declarations, but absences. What happens if political leaders clash publicly? What happens if international pressure mounts? What happens if the monarchy itself becomes the topic? The answer is always the same. The crown holds its position. And nothing more. Here is the deeper foreshadow. What seems ceremonial now may prove decisive later. The habits of restraint she forms today will determine whether the monarchy remains credible tomorrow. Because constitutional lines are only as strong as the person who refuses to cross them. And that refusal must be consistent. Boring. Almost invisible. This is the discipline Leonor is inheriting. Not the freedom to act, but the responsibility not to. As Spain looks ahead, the monarchy's future does not hinge on popularity spikes or dramatic gestures. It hinges on something quieter: trust that the crown will remain exactly where it belongs. Above politics, within the law, and firmly behind the line. The story continues. And in the next chapter, that line will be tested not by scandal, but by expectation, when the hardest decision will be to do nothing at all. And here's the subtle tension that defines everything: doing nothing is not inaction. In the crown's language, restraint is strategy. Every pause, every carefully measured smile, every step backward from public opinion is itself a demonstration of authority. The constitutional line she cannot cross is not a limit on power, it is power defined. Observers outside Spain may mistake it for rigidity. Critics may call it aloofness. But inside the palace, every moment is a rehearsal in legitimacy. Every gesture is a signal to the state, the military, the judiciary, and the people. This is a crown that respects its framework, even when the world demands otherwise. And yet, the line carries weight beyond legality. It carries expectation. Public curiosity is relentless, always probing the edges, always asking, what will she do next? Every decision is magnified, every pause interpreted. Social media churns theories. Editorials speculate motives. Television panels dissect body language. And through it all, Leonor must remain untouchable in neutrality. But what happens when neutrality itself becomes the story? This is where the challenge sharpens. The monarchy must be present enough to be respected, distant enough to be safe. Visibility must not translate into partisanship. Influence must be invisible. And all of this is rehearsed long before the public ever notices. Notice the patterns forming in her public appearances. Meetings with civic leaders, military inspections, ceremonial events, they are not just traditions, they are practical exercises in constraint. She is trained to lead without persuasion, to represent without opinion, to embody continuity without improvisation. Few realize how difficult that is. Humanity naturally seeks voice. Leadership instinctively demands action. Yet in Spain, one misstep can collapse decades of institutional trust. By minute 18, the foreshadow is clear. The monarchy is preparing her not for moments of applause, but for moments when the country wants guidance she cannot give. And yet, beneath every gesture, every protocol, there is an undercurrent of confidence. She learns to project calm authority while carrying the weight of unseen boundaries. Every tilt of the head, every pause, every carefully measured phrase reinforces her role. A queen in training who will never cross the line, because crossing it would be more than a mistake, it would be the undoing of centuries of stability. The final tease emerges. The next chapter will reveal the stakes when public expectation collides with constitutional duty. When the line she cannot cross becomes the very line she must defend against pressure, scrutiny, and impatience. And in that moment, the monarchy will show whether preparation, discipline, and restraint can truly withstand the weight of the modern world. The line is clear, the boundary is firm, and Princess Leonor knows that some power is preserved only by never touching it.